This project was undertaken with the approval of the National Science Foundation.
I was born in Michigan. When I was 7, my parents split and my dad moved to New York and my mom moved to California. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth between the two. I think that's part of the reason why I can't stay still now and move around a lot. I spent a lot of my formative years in San Francisco and then went to college in Los Angeles, and I graduated this last May. So the last couple of years were pretty big for me in sort of figuring out what I want to do going forward. I am a costume designer for plays and musicals and stuff. I love sewing. I've been sewing since I was a kid. Yeah, I love like the creative expression side of that and getting to like solve problems and using my hands to build things, but doing so in a way that I get to like create like a cool finished product at the end. Yeah, so I was doing that in college for work, and I knew I wanted to keep doing that, but I studied graphic design and environmental science. So I feel like I kind of have a lot of interests that are all over the place, and I'm like working on combining them and finding where they intersect, which is really exciting. And all of that kind of has nothing to do with like why I ended up here. Yeah, I just wanted to have a lot of like cool experiences before I really like commit to that path. I know that I want to do that, but I'm not in a rush to like start my career and like really like commit to anything too soon. I feel like there's a lot of traveling and cool job experiences I can have to build more skills, I guess, before I start down that path. I have a lot of siblings. I'm one of 4. I love my little siblings to death. It is sad being away from them because I moved around a bit growing up. I feel like I don't like miss them too much, but I do get sad when I talk to them and I realize how far away they are and I know that they miss me. I do love my family and going back home to visit. I have had a fair bit of travel experience before this. My dad is a big traveler, so I've been very lucky in that I've gotten to go to a lot of cool places because he's very adventurous and likes to go on trips and stuff, and so I think that kind of runs in the family a little bit. My older brother is not as big of a traveler as me. He does like to go on trips and stuff, but I think I'm more inclined towards the like the lesser explored places and more unconventional locations, and that's not quite his jam. And yeah, I'm fairly young, so I'm just figuring a lot of things out and very excited about everything that's happened so far and everything that's to come. It's not quite what I expected. I came to Antarctica because of so many reasons, but I really came here for the environment and to be in this like cold, snowy desert, and I thought there would be a lot more solitude, and the challenges that I thought I would face would be, I thought I'd be really lonely, and that was something that I was like kind of mentally preparing myself for, and like I brought all these things to do. I'm a big like journaler and drawer, so I brought tons of stuff for that and books to read, and I thought like, okay, these are great ways where I can like really spend some time alone and kind of like search within and you know, figure some things out, and that hasn't been it at all. It's been an incredibly social place. I didn't realize that like, and other people did, so I don't know how I missed the memo, but other people realized like, yeah, it's just kind of like it's like a little town, a really tight-knit community, and there's so many wonderful people and so many things to do all the time. So it is kind of hard to like balance my time with others and my time alone. I think I need alone time to recharge and to like feel like at peace. Otherwise I'm just running around too much. But I do love to be busy, and so having so many wonderful things to do all the time is also very exciting. So I I definitely think I'm somebody who tries to make the most of things and get the most out of every experience, sometimes to a fault. I feel like, yeah, I've really gotten to have a lot of unique experiences here so far in my time in Antarctica. I get to participate in things, but there's also enough like freedom where you can kind of do and start your own thing too. So yeah, I got to write a play with my friend, and that was so exciting, and it felt really cool to be able to yeah, have like the resources here and the support of the community to be able to work on your own projects and make something come to life. And I didn't expect that. I didn't think I would be doing anything like that at all. So that was really cool. Like I said, I came here for the environmental side of things and to like really like be in Antarctica and see all these wonderful things that you can't see anywhere else. After the initial adjustment of getting here and realizing that wasn't quite how things would be, once I like accepted that, everything that I've seen so far has been just so cool and wonderful. Like, sure, I'm not like going into ice caves every day, but I have still seen some really awesome things. Like, I just went snowmobiling to a wonderful little tent at the base of Erebus and like got to like look around 360 degrees and the whole time I was just kind of like, this isn't like, how is this really happening? How am I here right now? So it was really, really incredible getting to go in the ob tube and look under the sea ice. Like, that was unforgettable. Getting to hear the sounds of the seals. There are just so many things that you really can't see anywhere else, and they're just like a normal part of life here. And I also get to live vicariously through others. So hearing stories of my friends who go out into the field and come back and talk about the things that they've seen, like, that's really exciting too. And because the continent is so large, and also there's so many things, so many activities going on here on station, just social activities and stuff, I've had to accept that I can't do everything. And that's just a hard thing for me to accept in general, but I'm working on it. The world is just so big, and I want to do it all, but I can't. Getting to hear about it at least, and knowing that these things are happening, and that I get to have a couple of some of the, a vast amount of incredible experiences here, I feel very lucky. Well, I was talking to someone the other day who I was in Christchurch with. I was talking about how I'm gonna win her over, and he was saying like, wow, like it's just so different to hear you talk about this now than from when we were in Christchurch, because you were talking about how you're gonna go back to LA and start working and all of that stuff, and now it really has, like, I've met so many people who just live really, I don't know what the right word is, maybe like unconventional lives or have unconventional career paths, and knowing that that's an option has been so eye-opening for me, that you can do this kind of seasonal work. You can go to Antarctica, you can go to Greenland and Alaska and Kenya and Ireland and all of these other incredible places to do seasonal work or odd jobs or whatever, and that's like totally okay and cool and a great way to live life. Like, of course there are pros and cons, but it's really great to have conversations with people about their experiences and at least just see the other options that are out there. I think going forward, I know there are a lot of things I want to do, but I'm trying to not rush to like settle into anything too soon, because I want to take advantage of all of the things that are available to me now before I have things tying me down back home. I don't have an apartment. I have somebody who can take care of my car. I have people that I love, of course, but they'll be there when I get back and I can talk to them from afar. So being here has only increased my desire to continue to travel and have unique experiences. And yeah, it hasn't like scratched the itch at all. It's just made it worse. So I want like more remote environments, more cool jobs that I wouldn't expect I would have. I didn't know really what I was getting into when I came here, and I was just like, I'll take any job that I can get. And then I figured out you can kind of move within the program a little bit. So I was able, I ended up being a baker, and I didn't think I would be a baker, and that was really cool too. So I just, just kind of following your gut and seeing where you end up. That's been something I've been learning the last couple of years, which is really cool. And Antarctica has only strengthened that feeling. Yeah, I thought I would go to Antarctica, have the experience, check the box, and leave and be done. But now, also talking to people here, I'm like, South Pole sounds really cool. Oh, the field camp sounds so cool. And I know I can't go to all of them, but maybe there's a little bit more in me where I'd like to come back. And it is such a wonderful place. I think it would be sad for me to think about leaving and never coming back again. And if that happens, that's okay, because I'm so grateful for the experience I've had so far and have done so many things I'll never forget. But I think it would also be cool to not be one and done. Yeah, so it definitely has changed a lot for me going forward. I think it's also made me feel more independent. I have felt more like an adult here a little bit. I think people have, not everyone and not all the time, but for the most part, I feel like even with my young age, I'm kind of respected at the same level as other people, which has been a little surprising and very nice to be like taken seriously, and also just to feel very in control of my own decisions about my life. I think that's been really awesome as well. And as I go forward with having this under my belt, knowing I've done something that's difficult and that not a lot of people have done, I think that'll just kind of increase my independence and my confidence going forward.
Recently, it was very low key. And growing up, I've always been more of a homebody. Never went to parties in high school or anything like that. I'd hang out with my friends, 2 or 3 people at a time. I prefer hanging out with more than one person in one time, just because then there's more conversation. I never know what to say, and so there's more going on. There's more conversation happening. But yeah, I definitely was and am still more of a homebody. I like to be in a cozy spot, but then at the same time, I'm very adventurous. I like to joke that I, quote unquote, run away from home, but then I always find myself back in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up and still call home, just because I miss the nature. I love the outdoors. I love hiking. I love trees. I love pine needles. I think my sister kind of envies me for a little bit for my adventurousness. In recent years, she's been kind of trying to copycat me. Growing up, we had an au pair when I was, 1 or 2 years old, and she was from France, and we view her as our older sister. We're very close with her and her family, and so that's where I got the idea to go live in Germany and be an au pair for a year, because I wanted that connection with another family. And so I did that. It was a great experience. I got to spend more time with my relatives there. I got to experience the holidays. I love the Christmas markets there. Then a few years ago, she was looking for jobs in Germany. She doesn't speak German. I speak German. She speaks French. And so I was like, why don't you go to France where you speak the language? But she was just very dead set on Germany. I don't really know why. She didn't want to live with our relatives. She didn't want to live near them. So it wasn't that she wanted to go connect with them. So I just thought that was interesting. She is very proud of me and all the adventures I go on. And then when I went to college, kind of my social life got a little more active. You're living in a dorm. You're with everyone who's, relatively the same age as you are. And so you're just kind of forced to interact and always be around people. So that was an adjustment. Having to share a room with someone was an adjustment, but we got along really well, though. It was a setup so that you walk in and then the room, there's closets, and then you walk to 2 different sides of the room, and so then there's 2 people over here and 2 people over here. So it was kind of really 2 people were only in a room, but there's 4 in the suite, I guess. There wasn't a door separating them at all. Then we shared, there was a toilet room and then a shower. So that was fun. It was still kind of like separate sides. You didn't really see the other people very much. Definitely was less homebody like there in the beginning. Then towards the end, I started hermiting a little bit more. And then as the years went on, I was a resident assistant, so an RA, and so I had my own room. Kind of became more of a hermit in the sense like I could control my schedule and wasn't pressured constantly to go out and do things. And so then after that, I went to Germany, and then I guess you could say I'm just a very independent person, because in Germany I would travel alone. I don't know, like doing things alone. And so I did a lot of adventures by myself. I did make some friends. I do make friends. And so we went on a couple trips together, but every time I travel with people, I'm just constantly reminded that I prefer to travel alone, because if I mess up on, oh yeah, the walk's only going to be 2 miles. Oh no, it turned into 6. Oops, then I'm the only one suffering, and I don't have to feel bad about the people coming along on the journey with me. Yes, that happened in Norway. Anyways, and so then when I moved back to Oregon, I was living at home for a while. I went to culinary school and was working in a bakery, and it was a small bakery there were only 6 of us. I think, quick math. And we became very close. They're my second family. We're still very close. We have reunions every year, and I was sad to miss this one, although I didn't really honestly think about it so much because I was knee-deep in Christmas activities at work. And then I moved to Astoria, Oregon, where I had a studio apartment, and for most of the time, I was there for a year and a half. For most of the time that I was there, I only really had one friend, which is fine with me. She was my coworker, and then I changed jobs, and then I made new friends. But friends I made at my new job, we didn't really start hanging out until the last month before I moved. So that was exciting. When I was in Astoria, I did a lot of hikes alone and spent a lot of time by myself, and it was nice coming back to my apartment and my plants, and just kind of, I don't know, vegging, existing, doing what I want to do, and not like, I don't know, yeah, thinking of other people. But yeah, it was nice. And then I'd hang out with my friend and her husband from time to time, and that was fun. And so then I came here to Antarctica, and I found this opportunity when I was working at Glacier National Park in 2020. Someone posted something on the Facebook page, and I just like, oh, and I never really thought of it as an opportunity. I have a map of the world at home on my wall. It's one where you scratch off everywhere that you've been. And when I hung it up, I remember thinking like, well, I'm not going to go there, and I'm not going to go there. And one of those places was Antarctica. And so I'm very excited to go home and scratch off Antarctica now. That's going to be a great time. Although I'm debating if I want to scratch off just like the portion of McMurdo, because I haven't been to the whole continent. So I might just do that, but it's still better than nothing. Coming here, I keep telling people that my social life has never been so active. I don't really have any downtime for myself. One, because I do, you have roommates here, and so there's always someone kind of poking around. And then there's just always things going on as well. There's, whether it's a game night or, so-and-so wants to hang out, or something going on at the bar, like trivia or karaoke, or a birthday party. There's always something going on, and you just kind of get swept into it, caught up, and it's fun to, I don't know, always have something to do, because it's just for a short amount of time. It's not, indefinitely. There is the fear of missing out as well, and you have to kind of balance that and take that into account. But I'm enjoying my time here. I've met a lot of great people, and the friends that I've made are incredible. As we come to a close with our time here, I was thinking today and the last few days that I need to make a list of the people that I want to stay in touch with, because the emails that you communicate with down here don't work in the real world. So that is something that you kind of have to plan for. It's just a very busy time here, or like going down Ob Tube or going on a hike because you want to see all that you can while you're here. Definitely, I would almost say busier than college, but a good comparison. Looking forward, I would say I definitely think more about contract work and those opportunities, because when I was working at Glacier, it was a seasonal job, and I met people who do a lot of seasonal jobs. It was mostly just national parks within the US, and the same ones, kind of like there was only really a mixture of 2 or 3 going around. And I don't know if that's something that you know, this time of year I do this one and this time of year I do that one, and so it's just kind of, you have your set group and that's what you do. Whereas here, people do things all over. You come to Antarctica, and so of course you're thinking more outside of the United States than working in the United States. I don't know if that made sense. There's a lot of Alaska, but there's also a lot of things outside of the US, like in South America or in Europe. And so it just kind of makes you think a little bit more. There is contract work or seasonal jobs, not just in the US, like expand your horizon a little bit. And so just thinking about what I'm going to do after this. I came down here with the plan and intention to winter over, but I didn't think that I would consider coming back for another season after that, but it's something that is running through my mind. What job I would do, I don't know, but it is on my radar, like, well, maybe I'll come back down again. But yeah, so thinking about contract work or doing more part-time things. I am a baker here in Antarctica, and it definitely has kind of rekindled my joy of baking, because that was kind of burnout from previous job that I had. Coming down here has been a little bit healing for me in that regard. I had seriously been considering of like changing careers, but now it's more of a I don't know, because I'm like, well, maybe I will stay with baking, or maybe I can tie it into doing baking and something else, whereas just not completely scrapping it. Yeah, it's, the window's wide open and I'm not entirely sure where I'm gonna go, but definitely considering more on the contract side of things.
Hi, my name is Megan Krusleski, 33 years old. This is my first season. Let's see, life before McMurdo. What a trip. Feels like I don't even almost remember. I've been waiting tables for 13-ish years. Love-hate relationship with hospitality in general. I love, for any future bosses out there, love curating a guest experience, but certainly hate dealing with difficult people, even though with age, I get better at it, I get very good at it. I'm good at handling people now. But I kind of got into hospitality because I needed a job to get me through college. And then I went to school for theater, paid a lot of money to get a degree in make-believe. That is a bit of a, well, I won't say regret. The money is a regret. The money is a regret. And so throughout school, waited tables. And when I got out of college, the thought process was move to New York, I'll be auditioning, and to, help support myself, I'll wait tables. It's just kind of been waiting tables ever since. I haven't really auditioned. I think I burned myself out a little bit in school, like in educational theater, and lots to say about educational theater. That can be a whole separate interview. We'll talk about that later. But haven't auditioned. The idea was supporting myself financially to have experiences, whether that was to travel with my friends, be in friends' weddings, go to concerts, have nice meals, learn about food, wine, beverage, spirits, all the stuff. The idea was, I don't know, I'm just going to hang out and be in my 20s and figure out what's cool, what I like. And then I think somewhere mid to late 20s, I started to feel a little bit of like self-betrayal, like I wasn't doing what I wanted to do, which I think was acting. And I decided to move to LA. Moved to LA, had to get a job waiting tables to support myself. So here comes waiting tables again. Been doing that for 7 years. So I've lived in LA for the past almost 8 now. Kind of a similar situation, just trying to support myself and not traveling as much as I wanted to. And I think that was something I knew was missing. I just wanted to get anywhere. I was presented with an opportunity to go to Israel, and Israel had never once really been on my, it wasn't the first place I ever thought I would travel, but someone said, "Do you want to go?" I said, "Yes, let's go." And we went, and it was an amazing trip. But traveling is expensive, as we all know. And I think starting to feel the pressure to kind of put roots down, to really support myself beyond paycheck to paycheck. So, I'm in hospitality. There aren't really a lot of opportunities for servers to have, retirement plans and all of this stuff. And so I wanted to set myself up for that. Lots of my friends back home in Texas are buying property. Is that something I'm interested in? When COVID hit in March of 2020, I was feeling the pressure to just get out and do anything. And I was really interested in the Trans-Siberian Railroad and was Googling how to do that. I stumbled upon this like completely insufferable couples travel vlog. They had this full travel channel on YouTube. They were so obnoxious about it, but they had a great video on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And then the video immediately after was a cruise to Antarctica. I was like, that is so dope to get to go to Antarctica, like to go anywhere. Like, that's just wild. Like, I don't know if anyone in my personal life that's been there. That's so cool. Let me Google, how do I do that? Oh, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars. Never mind. How else can I get to Antarctica? Oh, there's a little like town where people, go and they do all these little odd jobs and get to travel and live and share Antarctica together for 6 months. Sign me up. I applied, not knowing that there was already a hiring freeze because of COVID. Kind of forgot about it, even though it was always a little bit in the back of my mind. And then in January of 2022, after kind of a brutal breakup, I was like, let me revisit this because I'm just desperate to get out and do anything, really need to shake things up, feeling very stagnant, feeling like I haven't done anything for 7 years. Applied as a food steward because that seemed to be the only thing that I felt like I could really offer Antarctica at the moment, or like offer McMurdo, I should say, the only way I could really get down here. And I got the job, and that was so exciting. Very stressful. The PQ process nearly killed me. It took every second of 4 months to get PQ'd, packed up my room in my apartment and drove my little car and my little cat to my mom's house and parked my car and my cat in the garage. The cat is inside with my mom, but parked in Houston. And here we are. Okay, McMurdo. Wow. Where to start there? I came during Windfly, so getting off of the plane was a trip. I really wish I would have taken a video or a picture or something to remember it, but I don't think I could ever forget. It felt like we were in a sci-fi movie. It felt like we were under arrest in a sci-fi movie. It was just like pitch black. There, all you see is these bright lights, and people are just like herding us off. Go, 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 herding us off the plane. I later found out it was something absurd, like -50 wind chill that night. We landed, and then almost immediately there was a Cantu. So the wind and the blowing snow was just out of control. Being herded into, rooms with multiple roommates, also jarring. And then the job as a food steward has been a journey. Gosh, so much to say about this whole experience, but the job in particular. But I think now, maybe because I'm talking about it in the yearbook phase, I'm almost exactly a month away from redeploying. I feel like I have this incredibly strong bond with 30-something people, doing this kind of really shitty, can I say crappy job at the bottom of the earth of emptying grease traps and just doing, I don't even know how many pots. I wish I would have counted from the start to finish, but maybe it's trauma bonding, but we're very close and it feels special and I will miss that. But I've done a lot of reflecting on what life will look like now that I'm a month away from redeployment. And I'm having a lot of anxiety about going back to LA because I don't know what it will look like. I don't know what I want for myself. This was my, first introduction to contract work, and I am intrigued. But I think in a conversation that I had with my brother the other day, I think that I have kind of decided that I feel okay with working jobs to just like support experiences. I might not ever have a career, and I think that that's okay. I think that it's something I've really stressed myself out about for the last decade, coming from kind of a small town in Texas where everyone, went to college, had a career, had a family, bada bing, bada boom, like, whatever. And I did not do that. And while it seemed maybe adventurous to some on the outside, to me, it just kind of felt like I was lacking, like I wasn't really doing anything or headed anywhere that didn't have direction. And maybe I still don't, but I think that what's most important to me at this point in time is just life experiences, is traveling, is making connections with people, is eating really good food and drinking really great wine and sleeping with multiple people in a room. That sounded weird, but you know what I meant. It's okay if it's not glamorous. I think I'm trying to give myself permission to lead that life and not, go home and immediately stress about, okay, we're in our 30s now, it's time to really settle down, buckle in, because there's nothing that really calls to me. The only thing, if I'm listening to my gut, if I'm really listening to my instincts are telling me to keep traveling. Nothing is really calling to me but doing really cool shit. That might come with a really shitty job on top of it, but I wouldn't really trade this experience for anything. I like that I could come back to McMurdo and other jobs and other positions like that. That is an open possibility. And knowing what I know now about how McMurdo works, about how, you don't necessarily have to have this extensive skill set to have a job outside of the galley, I still think that I don't regret coming in through as a food steward. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm incredibly anxious about going back. I really don't know what it's going to look like. Ultimately, I have an apartment to continue to pay for when I get back. Well, I'm also burping as I'm talking right now. The tomato bisque tonight at the McMurdo Galley was so good that I'm burping during this interview. And honestly, if that isn't a true testament to McMurdo Station, Antarctica, what is?
Born and raised in Colorado. Was there up until I turned 30. I did a little bit of traveling here and there. Went to see some cousins that were in Switzerland, and kind of got the travel bug from there. When I was in college, I went to school for aviation technology. I wanted to be a pilot, and then the airlines went bankrupt and went on a hiring freeze. And so I dropped out, moved to South Carolina by myself, fell into hospitality. Was there for 6 years probably. Came back home, stuck with hospitality until I needed to get a real job. And I got hired. My uncles insurance company. He had a couple Allstate franchises, so I went into the customer service side of that and claims department, and I just was miserable. I was really good at it though. I won Employee of the Year and Employee of the Month like 9 out of 12 months. So I was really good at it, but it was also out by the airport, and so I would spend most of my day just staring at planes taking off and landing and going, what the hell am I doing? So I called my old hospitality job at Hyatt and asked if I could come back on, and they never took me off the books. So I went back into the Allstate company to my uncle and told him that I was quitting. I was going to go back to Hyatt and that I was going to go travel Asia by myself and not return back to the States. So I left and went back to Hyatt. And as it got to the year that I was back at Hyatt, my bosses, God bless them, were constantly nagging me about when I was going to quit and go to Asia. They didn't want me to stick around. They loved having me, but they knew it wasn't for me. I left a month and a half before my 31st birthday, and then backpacked Southeast Asia for about 4 months by myself and had a working holiday visa in New Zealand. So I got to New Zealand, and the plan was to just do odd jobs here and there and then go to South America and do a whole circle around the world the first year. But as hospitality does, it sucks you back in, and I actually became a front office manager at Bolton Hotel in Wellington, and I stayed for 5 years. I wanted residency, but lovely COVID decided that New Zealand wasn't going to offer residency applications or anything, so I bit the bullet and moved back home and focused all my energy on Antarctica. I had applied 6 times to come down here, gotten primary positions, windfly, full year, alternates, primaries. I've been through the PQ process probably 4 or 5 times at this point. And so when I moved home, I made it my plan that I was just going to get a little part-time job until I figured out if I was going to make it down here this year. And finally it happened. I was supposed to be windfly, but UTMB NPQ'd me, then had to do a waiver, and the waiver only gave me the main body season. But I finally made it here. And this brings us to today. A lot more dirt than I thought it would be. A lot warmer than I thought it would be. It is a place like none other. It's nice because you don't really have any kind of worries or outside stresses. You don't have to worry about car insurance or grocery stores or rent or anything like that. You just wake up, go to work, and then you get to do whatever you want. When I got here, though, it was an odd time. So I got here right after windfly. So you come in and you kind of have this feeling like you're late to the party because everyone's bonded from the winter and then the windfly, and kind of come in as the outsider. And I was really excited for the next group of flights to come in, which should have been the next couple of days. And I was like, I won't be the new kid anymore. We'll all be new kids. And then all those flights were delayed for 2 weeks, and they became their own little pack. And so you had like the windflies and then the break freeze, as they call them. It was a weird position where I landed, where it's like I didn't really fall into either category. And so I was just like, that's fine. I'm just going to work and see as much as I possibly can. It was a little bit different than I thought it was going to be. It is very much a college vibe here, which is weird, being late 30s. Like, not really my scene. So I find the bars a little weird because they're very dark, but the people here, being surrounded by some of the most artistic, creative people, it can be a little overwhelming. Back at home and like my circle of friends, like I'm the adventurous one, I'm the crazy one and stuff, and coming here definitely kind of puts you in check a little bit. Just like, oh wow, there's a lot I haven't done yet, which is amazing. But so I just kind of decided maybe about a month into it that I was just going to take more of a backseat my first season and just take stock of what everyone does and how it all goes on, and really just try and prepare myself for wanting to come back next year. Because I want to come back and I want to do the trifecta of Palmer and Hull and all that, but I want to come back with a little bit more knowledge and feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin here. So this season, it's been amazing just getting to listen to people's stories or see people's artwork and how different people engage in the community in different ways rather than just going to the bar which is really nice. I've done plenty of hiking. Still have a couple of ones to do if someone will go with me. But it's been amazing. I mean, just looking out at the frozen ice, it's another world. It's another world. So I've enjoyed the scenery and the hiking and the animals and stuff, and I've just really taken a back seat to the engaging in the community because I haven't found my place yet, but I'm excited to find it next year. I think it's made me a little bit stronger in saying no to things that I don't want to go to. You always kind of have those friends that want you to come out to the bar, or they want you to go to a concert and you have to do this and you have to do that, and it's really been easy for me to hear, especially, to just be like, no, tonight I want to go to bed. Like, I've set a pretty good routine, which I've never had in my life, of going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, being more of an adult. My dad says it took all the way, took coming to Antarctica to become like an adult. Which I found out just because I untie my shoes at the end of the night instead of slipping them off, that I'm an actual adult. I lay my clothes out the night before and make sure those are set so that it takes me 15 minutes to get ready, including the shower, which blows my parents' minds that it doesn't take me forever to get ready like it used to. So I think those will be things to take back, is adding a little more structure into my normal life back home that I didn't have. I was always a night owl. I'd stayed up way too late, woke up way too early to go to jobs that I didn't like. And so I think being out here has made me be able to set my own boundaries and not feel bad about it.
Let's see, my life. Born in Germany, and my dad was in the Air Force, so that's why I was born in Germany. He met my mom in England while he was on leave from Germany, and we moved right after I was born, about 6 months later, to England, and we weren't there for very long, and then we moved to Texas, and I was a toddler, and then we moved back to England where I did primary school. And then from there, we moved to Oklahoma, and that's where I spent the bulk of my childhood. I went to elementary and then junior high school in Oklahoma. And then he retired, and we moved back to Virginia, which is his home state and where he grew up. I started 8th grade in Virginia, and then we lived with my uncle and his family as my parents were trying to figure out where their retirement house was going to be. So we were kind of in like a little suburban center for 8th grade, and then we moved, when they found what they were looking for, to the middle of nowhere in Virginia, and I was devastated because it was completely like out in the sticks and I hated it. I learned as years went on how lovely that was, but I did not enjoy it in the moment. I did high school in that new town, so I had to I got really good at picking up and moving and making new friends all over again. And then during high school, I was a bus girl as soon as I was old enough to get a work permit. So I started as a busser in a fine dining French restaurant in this little town that had a bank, a post office, a fine dining French restaurant, a 7-Eleven, and then like a burger pizza joint. It was just super random that there's this fancy restaurant in the middle of nowhere. The owner was a little bit chaotic, as restaurant owners tend to be. And one of the women there, who was a waitress, took me under her wing. And after I'd been yelled at one day, she marched me across the street. There was also a bank. And she marched me across the street to the bank. And I was like, give this young lady a job. She's a hard worker. And that's how I got into banking. And so I started as a part-time teller during high school. And it's time, like 2 years of being part-time teller. And the bank offered to pay for my associate's degree as long as it was in the realm of banking. So the broadest I could go with that was business administration, without going specifically into finance, because I wasn't certain that that's what I wanted to do. So I started taking part-time classes towards my associate's degree while I was working at the bank. And so that was night school. So working during the day, driving over an hour to get to the community college, and it ended up taking me 4 years to get my 2-year degree. And I expected that I would get this promotion and make more money, and when the time came, they were like, oh no, you have to have a bachelor's degree. So I was a little upset, and I wasn't going to spend another 4 years trying to get those last 2 years of school. And I'd actually met a girl during that time who was Swedish, and she was in the next village over as an au pair. And it's like one of those people that just has this amazing influence on your life, and you don't realize it in the moment, but looking back, you can see it. And being European, she'd done lots of traveling, and I was really envious of that because I'd done the traveling with my family as I grew up, but she'd done all of this independent traveling, and she was a couple of years younger than me. And I brought that up to her one day because we became really good friends. And she's like, well, why don't you go travel? And this was right around the time that the bank had said, no, you've got to do more school to be able to get a promotion. And so that conversation, the next day I went and said, all right, well, I'm going to go finish school and I'm going to go back to England for that. So I moved to London around 22, 23 and enrolled in school over there, the University of Greenwich, and finished up my bachelor's degree. And that was amazing because I went from this teeny tiny little town called Lovettsville, Virginia, and into the big city of London in my early 20s. And I was beside myself. I had so much fun. Then I finished school, and I stuck with business administration. And then I called my dad up shortly after finishing, graduating, and said, I've still got itchy feet. I'm going to go teach English in South Korea. Lots of people over here do that. And he said, well, if you're going to do something like that, you should join the Peace Corps. And I had never heard of the Peace Corps before. So after we hung up the phone, I went on Google, searched Peace Corps, and read the requirements and what it was all about. And I had those kind of tears of this is exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that was another conversation that just shaped the course of my life. I applied for Peace Corps from England. The whole time I was in college over there, I was waitressing as well. So I was doing school during the day, waitressing at night, and then traveling, because when you're in Europe like that, you can get super inexpensive flights and train rides and just go all over the place. So I traveled a lot during that time. And I put out an application for Peace Corps, which ended up taking me almost 2 years to get in. And it's very much like the USAP's PQ process. It's the same kind of thing. You have to get medical clearance and a background check. But the part that was difficult was because I was in England and they were sending all of these American forms over, and I would go to the doctors in England, and then it was all snail mail back then. There wasn't scanning it and emailing it over. So the paperwork, the doctors would fill my weight out in kilograms or stone and my height in centimeters. And it was line by line, all of these different kind of units of measurement, or just something that was a little bit different over there. And Peace Corps office in Washington, D.C. would get the papers and then look at it and be like, oh, your weight should be in pounds, and mail it back, FedEx it over to England. I'd have to go to the doctor, get it changed, mail it back to them, and then they'd say, oh, and your height. And instead of just going through everything, they did it line by line, back and forth. And it took 2 years to get in. So I was very dedicated at that point to the mission of getting into Peace Corps. And so a lot of people try and pick a specific country. And when they offered me Morocco, I didn't have a single clue where that was. I just said, yes, sign me up. I'm ready to go. This has been a very long process. And that was it. I went back to the States for a short visit, and then Peace Corps flew me over, much like coming down to Antarctica. 60 of us got on a plane together, and I flew to Morocco, and I lived there for 27 months. The first 3 months were learning language, which is called Tamazight, and then 2 years of small business development. And I worked with a women's cooperative that make naturally dyed carpets. It was just small business development. So we taught them how to sell them online without a middleman coming in and buying up the carpets for super cheap. They're keeping all their profit. That's a whole nother story. So just over 2 years in the Peace Corps. And then I came back to America to visit with family again. And then I, during that time, went back to, I'm going to go to South Korea and teach English. That was the next step. And so I started applying for jobs, and I got a contract, and I had a flight booked, and then I met a boy. And 8 years later, I was still in Virginia. The relationship only lasted about 6 months, but 8 years later, I was still in Virginia. And I was in banking still because that's what I knew. And I'd managed to get the promotion and get a career going and all of that during that time. And it was a great 8 years. There was a lot of good things that came from those 8 years. But I was struggling in corporate America and felt unfulfilled and knew that there was something else and another way of doing it, and that I didn't have to do it the kind of societal norm, if you will. And around that time, I started hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and then COVID hit and I couldn't go to the gym anymore. So I really started trail running on the AT. And I met someone while I was doing that who was through hiking, and I'd never heard of through hiking before. And they invited me, I made friends with them, and got invited to go on a 5-night section hike of the Appalachian Trail, which was kind of a catalyst to, basically I went on it for those 5 nights. My first 5 nights of actually camping, other than car camping, first backpacking trip ever. And I came home and I sold my couch. It's like, I'm going to do this. And that led to me selling most of my possessions and selling my condo, car, all the big stuff, and then just keeping some boxes of travel trinkets and the things that were really sentimental, but really lightening my load and turning into a minimalist, if you will. And I ended up, after I closed on the condo, I gave the bank my notice and told them that I wasn't just taking a little break. I was done. And then I went and through hiked the AT, and that was 2021. And that was my exodus from banking. That's what I dubbed my hike. And it was the beginning of living a nomadic lifestyle. I'd started to realize that I wasn't going to be happy until I was traveling. And like whenever I go back and visit, like the kind of, you should be in a relationship and starting a family, and you feel all of that. And I tried to go that, and it just wasn't in here. Did the hike, and that took about 7 months. And then I went over to England after the hike and took care of my grandmother, my mom's mom, who was in late stage, I'm probably gonna cry. She was late stage Parkinson's, and that was the beginning of 2022. And I got to be her primary caretaker for about 5 months, and it was a very special time because she was at the end, and I got to be there with her, and I'm her only granddaughter, and we had a very special relationship. And that was just really, really special. The whole time I'd been out on my Appalachian Trail hike and over in England, I was also signed as my dad's primary caretaker because for the future, because he found out that he needed a new liver. And before I left to go on the AT, I kind of held his hand through all of his initial doctor's appointments, because you have to go through a long checklist of appointments and screenings to be able to qualify for a liver transplant. And I got to go through the beginning stages of that and agreed that when the time came, I'd be his primary caretaker. But he had to have this period of sobriety, 6 months, before he was allowed to actually make it onto the list. So once we got to the beginning of those 6 months is when I then went and did the AT hike. And after that, it was just kind of a waiting game. So when I went over to England, I knew at any time I could possibly get that call. And so about five months into being over there, we got the call. And I had to very quickly scramble with my aunt who lives over there to get my Nana into a care center or home because she needed full-time care. And we transitioned her into a very nice home around the corner from my aunt's house. And I flew back to the hospital because by that point, my dad, the transplant thing happens very, very quickly. He had a successful transplant, and I was there at the hospital right about 10 days out from it, or a week out from it. And then I spent the next 3 months or so, 3 or 4 months, taking care of him post-transplant, and that was very challenging. My grandmother and I had this, my dad and I have a special relationship too, but I think relationship with your dad is a little different than with your grandmother. So it was very, very challenging when my brother came over because he lives in England. So he came over and kind of gave me some vacation, R&R time, and helped as well. Both of my brothers helped. And then when he was still recovering, I had to stay kind of in a makeshift hotel with him down in Richmond, Virginia. And because his appointments were all in Richmond, so we were going back and forth to the hospital. And during that time, I knew eventually things were going well as far as his recovery, and that I needed to start focusing on me again and figuring out what my next steps were going to be. And I knew that I wanted to find a sustainable way of traveling and working and figuring out seasonal and contract work and all of that. And I was scrolling on Facebook in this hotel room one day, and I was quite annoyed with him on that day. And I came across a posting for USAP and a job in it. If you want to work in Antarctica, you can. It was on Facebook of all places. And I remember clicking on it and looking at it and then doing research about it, like seeing that there were steward positions, because I'm obviously not a scientist, and seeing that all of my restaurant experience that I'd had growing up like qualified me to come over as a steward. But then reading a little deeper on the internet and like looking at Reddit and seeing that, people apply for year after year after year and don't get in. And thought, okay, well, I don't know how dedicated I am to this. I've never even thought about going to Antarctica, but I do want to see the whole world. But I don't know that I'm willing to just keep applying year after year. And so I moved on. And then 5 minutes later, I had this little moment in my head. I'm like, well, you're never going to get it if you don't apply. So you might as well put an application in. And that was on a Saturday. And on Monday, Jaden from GSC reached out and was like, hey, can you interview tomorrow morning? So application in on Saturday. Tuesday morning, I was talking to Jaden. I think a couple of days later, I was talking to Chef Rob. And the running joke in my family is that my dad drove me crazy enough that I came to the South Pole. And here I am in Antarctica, and we're almost to the end of the season, which is crazy because time has just gone by so quickly. In the beginning, it was slow, and I was like, oh Lord, what have I done? I had that moment as well when I had the interviews going. I was like, whoa, this is actually happening. But it's been fantastic. It's been a lot of work. 54-hour work week. And then, so I'm a stewie in the galley. And then I've taken advantage of being able to do the 10 hours of part-time work. So I not only was bartending on Friday nights or at day bar, then I was also part-time in the retail store. I've had a coffee shift on Saturday mornings. What else? I don't know. Between that and going to the gym and the regular job and getting outside as much as possible, time just constantly sleep deprived here. There's just even if you catch up, like you get a good day where you can get a proper 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep. The next day it's over. You can't stay consistent with that. I find that very difficult, at least. Maybe you can, and I just haven't mastered it. So time here has been busy. And it's been a little bit difficult as well with the time change, trying to keep in touch with everybody back home. But it's been great. And I've been able to volunteer with a group of scientists and go out into the field to iHut and do a shakedown. Just some really, really fantastic experiences, and just getting out to Hut Point in the mornings before work. And I was also picked to work out at Willie Field. So I feel like that has really been a big part of my happiness here, because I feel for the people that have been in the galley the entire time, 6 days of being in the galley, whereas I've got 3 days out at the airfield of kind of peace and quiet and a much slower pace, and then 3 days of the hustle and bustle in town. And I really have enjoyed the balance of that. Kind of helped keep me sane during all of the chaos. Yeah, so just a good experience, but a tiring experience. Some great networking and just meeting all kinds of fascinating people with similar stories or completely different stories, but a lot of like-minded, adventurous people down here, and that's been really, really fantastic. How it's changed me, I don't feel that I have really changed, but I also think that can be something that you see in hindsight. I think as far as experiences go, doing the Peace Corps in Morocco was kind of like time travel backwards 300 years, like living in a mud house and just having a tap of cold water and not having a shower and going to a public bathhouse and learning a different language and living with mainly agricultural kind of income, just a very different, like I said, time travel about 300 years backwards, and that completely changed me as a person. And again, something that I was able to see in hindsight, because before Peace Corps, I was very much a full face of makeup, always had my hair colored and blow dried and straightened, and always wearing name brand clothing. And then I went and did Peace Corps, and it humbled me, living with just in a community that nobody has those things, and they're not important. And after Peace Corps, I was just very different, very, very different. And then moving on to the AT is kind of like even more primitive than that, because you're living out of a backpack and out of a tent, and you're getting water directly from a stream or a water source, and sure, you're going into town to get your food, so there's some sense of civilization there, but it's a challenging environment. Both of those are very different, challenging environments. And I think that being here at McMurdo is kind of like being in America. You have it's cold when you're outside, but you have all of those luxuries, and your food's cooked for you. I almost feel spoiled. Well, I do feel spoiled here. Aside from the fact of all of the work, it's not a hard life. I don't feel super changed yet. I think it has validated wanting to live a life against kind of the societal norm and against the grain of what society tells you. You know, you're going to go to college and start a career and meet someone and have a family. And this has kind of been a big step into that seasonal work and contract, like just living a different lifestyle than what most of my friends do back home. And it's validated that, like, okay, this is something I can definitely do, and I'm capable of it, and I'm enjoying it. I'm happy. And on that note, it is just made me value the relationships with the people back home a lot more, because of that time difference, not being able to just, after work, pick up the phone and have a conversation of how my day went. That's been the most challenging, I think, thing here for me is the connection. And when I came over and I got to Christchurch, and you kind of fall into a little group there, because everyone kind of figures out, you're all in the same hotel, and you figure out that you're coming down here together. And I felt a lot older than everyone in the group, and I struggled with that a little bit in the beginning, because I was like, oh, maybe I'm too old to do seasonal and contract work. Like, all of these people are in their early 20s, and I'm in my late 30s. And I had a little bit of I wouldn't say identity crisis, but an age crisis. And then I got down here and built relationships with those people, the younger people, and where I was confident in my decision to come down here and to do seasonal work and live nomadically, I realized that there is a little bit lacking on self-confidence. So, like, just kind of struggling to find, because you're thrown into this environment of you completely new people, a new place to live, a new job, and everyone's going through it together. And then I felt a little bit older than everyone, and I just struggled to find my place. But some of those younger people had the most confidence I'd ever seen. And I don't know if I had that when I was that age and exuded it and didn't realize it, or I don't know. But I really admired it, and I was open with the ones that I saw it in. And then, I don't know, that they just kind of commented, like, it's a learned behavior, and you can do it too. And that's been something that's kind of resonated with me. Just learning things from the younger generation down here has been pretty neat.
I was born in Massachusetts. I went to culinary school. I have my associate's in baking and pastry art. I moved to Illinois after I graduated college because my sister was getting her PhD there. And so I went and lived with her for a little while. I lived in Illinois for 5 years, working in restaurants. I was managing the kitchen of a bakery. And then I didn't want to do that anymore, so I quit. And I applied to hotels all over the country. I probably filled out 50 applications. First one I filled out was the only one to call me back, which is Princess Tours in Alaska. So I moved to Alaska in 2009 for a 6-month summer job working at one of the hotels, and attended a job fair in like August of that year while I was still like the princess put on a job fair, and got hired over the phone at this bakery in Girdwood, Alaska for a full-time, full-year job. So I moved to Girdwood and lived in Girdwood for 5 years. So living in Girdwood, I started working on the slope of Alaska, which is very similar to this kind of style of stuff, and started making like real money, like paid off all my debt from school and everything, and started looking at maybe buying a house. Girdwood is a very expensive town. Couldn't buy a house there, so moved to Valdez, lived in Valdez for 2 years. And then I moved to Washington State and was living in Washington State, again, still in the culinary field, was managing a kitchen. Similar situation to Illinois. I didn't want to do my job anymore, didn't have anything holding me to the town, so I Googled Antarctica support services, and so I came here. Pretty much as I expected. It's very, very similar to the slope. A lot more activities than the slope. So the slope is 12 hours a day, every day, and you work straight. You get no days off. So it's just like you eat, sleep, work, and work out, and that's your day. So there's a lot more things to do here. There's a lot more downtime. Like, it's pretty much as I expected it to be. Honestly, it's not really that much different from what I would be doing back home, which is, eat, sleep, work, quilt. So I hike a lot less here, but I'm actually working out at the gym a lot more, so there's a balance. Well, I'm intending to do this for the next 3 to 5 years. So like I said, I just got a verbal hiring for next summer. I'm going to go to Pole. He said I'm primary, summer, Pole, and alternate winter, because they won't let you primary winter at Pole without a face-to-face interview with the Pole hiring manager. My goal for the next 3 to 5 years is just to work here, save basically 90 to 100% of my income, and then travel. So what I'm really hoping is that it changes me in the sense that I really get to really start traveling and have the money to do it, whereas like working in the culinary field, you really just don't make a lot of money. So it's really hard to like live and pay rent and all that stuff and travel and experience things. So that's what I'm hoping will change my life for the better, and I'll be able to do more things and see more things.
Hi, my name's Lacey. I was born and raised in Hawaii. Grew up with one sibling. I guess I could say I'm pretty fortunate for living in Hawaii and being raised there. Who wouldn't want to be in paradise for 17, 18 years of their life? I feel like I was born in the wrong state. I don't like the heat. I love the cold. I mean, look where I am now, Antarctica. And a lot of people don't really understand that I'm from Hawaii because I don't look like it, but my family, I'm third generation born and raised in Hawaii. My dad was born there and my grandpa was born there. My great-grandfather was one of the first pharmacists on the Big Island in Hilo. People are like shocked when they hear I'm from born and raised in Hawaii and that, I'm the third generation to do it. So I was pretty fortunate for growing up there, but definitely wanted to move on and get off the island and explore other places, and that's kind of what made me end up in Colorado. I got accepted to Johnston Wales University, where I wanted to study culinary arts and food service management. So I did that for 4 years, graduated with my bachelor's. I worked throughout college. I got a job at a little pizzeria place. It was locally owned by a couple. They were amazing. They pretty much were my second family while I was working there.
And then when I graduated college, I took some time off. I kind of quit that job, took some time off, spent it with my family doing a road trip, and then got a job at the DoubleTree in Denver Tech Center. That's where I learned the majority of what I know today. I worked my way up through the company a little bit, and I worked there for almost 6 years. And then while I was doing that, one of my best friends worked for a nonprofit called Project Angel Heart. They provide meals to terminally ill people. I'd go and volunteer occasionally, and the executive chef worked at the South Pole Station for 10 years, and he had his chef coat hanging up in his office, and I was always curious about it, and he got to talking about it. His nickname was Cookie John at the South Pole. I guess he made a lot of cookies or something. I didn't understand the full story of it, but the bell they always ring there, I guess he started that. And so he would just tell me the stories, tell me I should apply and, definitely do it. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it sounded interesting, and I was always interested in Antarctica. It made me sound silly, but I love the movie 8 Below with Paul Walker about the snow dogs, and they're left in Antarctica over the winter, and they had to survive and stuff. And it's one of my favorite movies. I don't know why, but I always was interested in Antarctica, but I never, for some reason, I didn't jump at the opportunity when he said I should apply. And I think something was just holding me back. And then I saw one of my culinary school friends. I saw that she came down here, and I saw pictures on her Facebook and stuff, and saw how awesome it was, because I never saw pictures of McMurdo Station before or anything till then. And I was like, okay, I have to apply. I want to go. So I applied, got an email a month later from Russell, who was the executive chef at the time for McMurdo Station. Did an interview, and then he offered me the job a couple weeks later. And I put I put a 2-month notice in with my job. And I had just bought a condo in Colorado. So at first I was very hesitant, and I was asking a lot of people, should I do this? Because, I had this brand new condo I was renovating, and, I didn't know, I had to start off as a production cook in Antarctica, because at the time back in 2016, they had a lot of returning people. So of course the returning people get first dibs at sous chefs. So I had to start a production cook. So when he offered me the job, I definitely had to think about it, because I just bought my condo, and the pay wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. But in the end, it was why wouldn't I take it? It's a once in a life opportunity. That's kind of how I started to think about coming down here, and how I got down here. That's my start of my journey. And then once I got here in 2016, I should remember the first time I was on that C-17, they said, okay, we're 50 miles out, everyone needs to put on their clothes, or they're bundle up and everything. And so a lot of the people you knew were first years going down there. Me and a bunch of other people who met, we're all bundling up with every single piece of gear they gave you. Could barely move. We were so fluffed up with gear and stuff, and you see other people not really putting much on. And later did I realize that they weren't putting things on for a reason. We got off the plane, and it was not as cold as everyone thought it was going to be. I ended up having to take lots of layers off while trying to take pictures of everything while getting off the plane. They rush you to the bus to get on it. They don't really like you to linger. So I'm trying to rip clothes off of me because I'm hot. At the same time as filming and taking pictures of the plane and the bus and the mountain, off to the distance. And so that was my first experience landing in Antarctica. It's a pretty funny one. But as the season went on, I was in the galley, did action stations my first year basically. No one else on my shift wanted to do them besides one other, so it was pretty much every night me and this other person were out doing action stations. So it was like burrito bar, burger bar, and stir fry station. Being out there gave me the opportunity of meeting almost everybody on station, because everyone comes up and wants, the action station, because it's a little bit different it's a little bit better quality and better, you get to see the action stuff, and some of it you get to build your own, so it's a little bit better than what they serve on the hotline, so a lot of people choose to get that instead. So my first year I knew a good amount of people from McMurdo, and like the social aspect of it was great. I went out, made tons of friends, and it was just an amazing experience. My second year here, I came back June 1st. I was actually only gone for about 3 months, March, April, and May, and then I came right back, and I did a half winter into summer, so because I really wanted to experience winter, and the only opportunity he had was like a half season, so I took it, and so I did about 10.5 months here. I came back as a production cook because all sous chefs were filled for winter, but then once summer hit, I turned straight into a sous chef. Some of the people who were my equals last year as production cooks, I was now their sous chef, so we had that barrier to try and get through to where I was equal with them 1 year, and then I'm in charge of them the next year. But it was great. They were all my friends, and it was a great year. Then my third season down here, I was fortunate to be the sous chef for Williams Airfield. It's the airfield where the skied aircrafts can land, so nothing with wheels. They all have to land with skis. So the Twin Otters, Baslers, and the LC-130s. I ran that kitchen out there. I call it my little trailer park town. It's just a bunch of trailers on skis that all get put into place, and it makes a tiny little town. And my kitchen, my galley was like 2 double wide trailers just smashed together, and they called it a kitchen and a dining area. It was pretty funny, but it was awesome. I got to meet a lot more people, especially the Air Guard, who fly the LC-130s and who provide a lot of support for us. Got to feed a bunch of air traffic controllers, firefighters, electricians, plumbers, whoever was out there. And so it was fun. Thought it was going to be my last season, so I took two seasons off, and then my fiance, who I met down here my first season, so 2016, I met him. We've been coming down together ever since. He decided he wanted to come back. He kind of was a little bit sick of his job back in the States where we lived. We live in New Hampshire now. That's where he was born and raised. And so he said, I'm kind of wanting to go back, and you don't never say that it's your last season, because it turns into not being your last season. I should know better. Hearing this all the time, but I thought it was my last, and boy was I wrong. So we both kind of quit our jobs. COVID had definitely changed our jobs back in the States to where it was just unbearable to work in our fields anymore. So we're like, I was fine with coming back. So last year in 2021, we decided to come back. I was just a sous chef in the McMurdo galley again. It was tough. We had a lot of different levels for COVID, where we had to wear masks or just follow certain rules. At one point, nobody could eat in the galley because there was too many people here, and not everyone could space out enough in the galley, so we had to do like 2 different lines, and I've never seen so many people eat or pile so much food in their to-go containers than that whole week. It was crazy. I think we went through 3 times the amount of food that we normally would have gone through because they didn't know if they were going to come back to the galley for another round of food later, so they just kind of piled it on. So that was interesting. And then this year, 2022, I was very lucky, and I got to be the sous chef at LDB, which is the Long Duration Balloon Facility for NASA. It's kind of been a dream of mine to work out there ever since I came down here. But, with the people who return every year kind of have an in with that place. So if they don't come back, then there's an opening. But a lot of people kind of slide right in there. And so this year I was very fortunate to work out there and meet the scientists who actually, put the payloads into the air. The rigging team, CSBF, who actually makes the balloon do what it does, and just amazing people out there. Wonderful. This year in town, though, was a little challenging. I'd say the dynamic of the entire station is a little bit different from years past. There's a lot of new people this year, which is good and bad. But just the overall, attitudes of everybody, the work ethics of people has just changed this year. I've noticed more than other years, so it's definitely different. But working in Antarctica has definitely been an amazing experience. I think it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Growing up in Hawaii, that's very big to say because, it's paradise, but I think Antarctica beats Hawaii nonstop, like out of, 10 out of 10. It's gorgeous, and I've actually had the 2 very lucky experiences to see, 3 actually, to see Antarctica, not just McMurdo. I've been to South Pole Station for 1 week while I covered somebody's R&R. I got altitude sickness. I got very sick there, but it was still amazing opportunity. I got to go onto a Basler plane to Holland Range, and just recently I got to go on a helicopter ride to the Dry Valleys. So I've done a lot since I've been here, and I'm very, very lucky. That also plays a big part in how my life has changed after Antarctica. When I go home and see friends and family, they're just in awe about how the fact that I got to come to Antarctica and for 5 seasons now. And they always want to know every little detail about Antarctica because nobody really is very educated about Antarctica. And it's I feel like it's my job to educate people since I have been working here for 5 seasons now. And you kind of feel very special because everyone just, thinks it's so cool, and they want to see pictures, and they want to know everything about it. So, I don't know, you just have this like special, twinkle about you that just happens. And I've done, my sister's a school teacher, so I've done a class, 2 classes for her on Antarctica. We did a PowerPoint and showed them pictures and everything, and so it's definitely, going home, you're definitely considered a cool person by coming to Antarctica, so that aspect's very cool. And you get to educate people on things they never know, or some place they will never be going to. So that's cool. And another way it's kind of changed my life is it's opened my eyes to a whole nother world of traveling. Basically, I didn't ever think I was going to travel as much as I did when I first came down here, but I found my partner in life down here, and that all we want to do is travel now. So Antarctica opens the doors for that by, you know, getting you to New Zealand and another country that you've never been to before. And from there, it gets you can go anywhere. I've been to Australia from New Zealand, and it's the fact that you get to save a lot of money while you're here, and then your contract is up, so you don't have to work unless you go straight back to work. But so you have the opportunity and the money to go travel. So I think that aspect has changed my life quite a bit. I still have 2 continents left to go. Hopefully I get those done in the next couple years. For the most part, I think it's just gonna go back to New Hampshire and get another job and see what happens from there. Yeah.
So my life before coming to Antarctica primarily consisted of working seasonal jobs for about 20 years. I worked in national parks, ski resorts. I did my working holiday visa in New Zealand, in Christchurch primarily, which is where we deploy out of. And then also did some time in Portland, Oregon, where I went to culinary school, and did some other volunteer work. And that's pretty much the gist of what I've been doing before coming down to Antarctica. Life in Antarctica consists of, for me, routines that you cling to, and with the flexibility of understanding that although you have your routines that keep you sane, you need to be flexible and come up with other ways to self-soothe when inevitably those routines have to change, meaning that population could increase. Your favorite place to get your alone time may have to change. Your work objectives also are constantly lots of different spokes in that wheel. So I really enjoy puzzles and figuring out how to quickly recover from things like that. So it's kind of a brain exercise that I hope to strive at while trying to complete these endeavors. However, it's not always about never making mistakes. It's about quick recovery, for sure. There's such a different side to this place that it's so difficult to describe. And I suppose that's any seasonal job, because it's always different based on what the objective is for that season, the players involved, the equipment involved, what hiccups happen, and how people in different work centers and the leadership responds to them. So every year is a different and new year. I always tell my bosses that as a return employee, I know it's sometimes it's difficult to hire people who have been here for so many years, because you're afraid that they're going to pretend like it's last year and say, well, this is the way we used to do it and it worked then. Well, it doesn't necessarily going to work that year. I think it's important to realize that and know that the job is never going to be done. A lot of people try to make it a race. The standards are different based on logistics and what's reasonable to do. So that's a good lesson in patience and being versatile and like flexible. So I like that exercise of being down here and being able to kind of impart that on newer people who get frustrated and remind them to desperately cling to their routines, that they can figure out what helps keep them safe and sane by identifying as early as possible like what is annoying them. It could be so many different things. Either you're not eating right, or you're not eating enough, or you're not sleeping well, or you don't have enough alone space, or you don't have enough socialization. So it's good to identify those things right away and then fix them. Yeah, and ask other people for advice. That's huge. I do it still, like all the time. So, yeah. And also remembering that the people around you, like, you never know what's going on in their life, in their mind, and just to be like kind and try not to take things personally. That's pretty important here. I mean, it's definitely given me a lot of perspective. What really draws me to this place more than, and the science is a huge part of it, of course, and I love the energy and the knowledge and working with a lot of different work centers and getting to meet other people and learn from them, whether they're a heavy machinery operator or a janitor or a scientist. I love learning different people's perspectives. I feel like I'm interested in the sociological experiment that is these stations, more than just wanting to take pictures and getting out to the field and things like that. Although those are definitely like interests. I definitely, like, from doing all the other seasonal work, feel like, yeah, McMurdo is a melting pot of so many different things that you can constantly learn from if you know how to look for it.
Before coming to Antarctica, I was living in Portland, Oregon, working in the food industry. I'd been out there for about 9-10 years, moved out from Kentucky, Ohio area, which is where I grew up, though I moved to the West Coast to kind of just experience something new, broaden my horizons, and I loved it, so that's why I stayed. That's probably the most adventurous thing I had done up to that point. Being on the West Coast, obviously it was very expensive. So I had to work 3 jobs to pay rent, and so my free time was limited. So while I loved like the area I lived in and I loved the West Coast, I don't feel like I was necessarily like experiencing life as much as I could. My life was very routine, I think. Work, more work, sleep, hang out a little bit, more work, school, kind of that. I got to a point where I got laid off from my main job. They closed the store I was working in, and then my second kind of job, I also got laid off. I was working as a caregiver, and my client had to go to like a long-term rehab facility, so as a private caregiver I couldn't work for her because it was state run. So I lost 2 jobs, 2 of my 3 jobs within a couple weeks of each other, and my only one left was my most unreliable job. At the time I was also like going through a divorce, and I just kind of needed a refresh and realized, you know, maybe I want to move somewhere else. I had considered moving back home to Kentucky, which is kind of what the plan was, even though I wasn't thrilled about it. So I started thinking about contract work, because being in the industry, I knew people that had worked in Alaska, or stuff like that, or lodges and things like that. So I realized that that might actually be a possibility, so I started looking at Alaska. I don't really recall what directed me to Antarctica. I think just through all the Googling and stuff, I saw something and I was like, I wonder if people cook down there. So I just Googled cooking jobs Antarctica and found a posting, and I applied. Didn't really think anything of it, just sent it in, and then a few days later I actually got contacted for an interview, so here we are. It's been life. There's been ups and downs. It's been full of surprises. It's been eye-opening, I think. I do sometimes like fall into where I just feel like I'm in normal, ordinary life, but other days I just feel like I'm on this crazy adventure, and I realize where I'm at, and I feel lucky to be experiencing something that a lot of people in the world will never get the chance to. And I think it's giving me an appreciation for life. I'm trying not to take things for granted. I know like our access to things are limited down here. So I try to be more appreciative of like the things I have, and then the opportunities I'm getting from being here. And I think it's giving me an appreciation for, I think, for time. Realizing that I can choose how I spend my time, and I can relax a little bit with the financial side. Since the contract work, you know, we don't have to pay for housing or anything down here. I'm able to save up enough money that in my off time, if I want to take a month off or whatever, I can do that, and I can actually see my family, hang out with friends, travel, and just experience life, where I'm not constantly worried about like if I'm going to be able to pay rent or not, and just forgetting about all of the life outside of work. So I think that's the biggest thing, is it's giving me an appreciation for time. I would say the only other thing would be it's given me a really big drive for traveling and experiencing other places. Coming here was only my second time out of the country, and the first thing was just like a really minor little trip. So now I've definitely got the travel bug, so.
I'm a cook or a chef. I've only ever done that professionally. Career-wise, I've went to culinary school over 20 years ago. And I've been just hopping around the country cooking. Initially in restaurants, and then most recently before deploying as a personal chef for a family. And so before this, before Antarctica is also this like pre-COVID caveat, because they happen at the same time for me. But I was living in Portland with a partner. I had a couple of jobs, all cooking, but I was a personal chef, and then I worked kind of as a consultant for a friend who had a jam company, and then right when COVID hit, she realized that people weren't interested in purchasing high-end jams. So she kind of pivoted and thought that soups, especially with like people getting sick and things, was kind of so high-end soups. So she had me come in and develop a bunch of recipes for her, and I was doing that. Then my third job, I was working in a prep kitchen for a food cart, a barbecue food cart. And so all of the barbecue was done on the spot, but then everything else, like all the sauces and sides, that's kind of what I was doing. And all of that was in Portland. I had been in Portland since 2007. Prior to that, I was in New York, which is where I'm from, New York City. And then I went to culinary school in Providence, Rhode Island, and then had a brief stint in Western Massachusetts where I followed a boy. Silly. That's it. A lot of cooking, and kind of every avenue of the culinary field that I wanted to explore. The Antarctic part came with a friend from Portland who told me she was coming down, and that was in October of 2019. So kind of right before COVID, and I thought she was crazy. We met for lunch maybe about 2 or 3 days before she deployed. She told me what she was doing. I told her that it was the most insane thing I've ever heard, but have fun. You couldn't pay me enough to do that, I think was an actual quote I said. And she was doing a full year, summer at Pole and then winter at McMurdo. And she encouraged me to apply, and I was like, that's just, no, not gonna happen. And that kind of brings us to right before I decided to apply. And then I'll go, so we kept in contact via Facebook Messenger, and right around the new year, she's like, this is when they open applications, like, why not apply? And at that point, I didn't know, I don't know why actually I applied. Looking back, it was 2020, January 2020, there wasn't really much crazy going on. I had just come back from visiting my family in New York, and I hadn't gone back for a while. And I was relatively happy with all my life, with all my work decisions and family and friends, but it was kind of like, well, maybe I'll just apply for this job. Like, why not? I have nothing else to do. I think it was like a late night, and I'm like, I haven't updated my resume in forever. This will at least give me a reason to update my resume. And that was that. And then COVID hit, and I kind of completely forgot about Antarctica. Then there was everything that came with that. In the culinary field, it was, I was fortunate enough to keep all 3 jobs. The personal chef job, instead of going to their home to cook, oddly enough, the woman that I worked for, she would actually bring all of the ingredients to my house and I would cook it, and then like for the week, and she would pick it up at the end of the day, which was kind of perfect, which is rare. That never happens, but she just didn't want me coming in, like, because I would take the bus and stuff, which I thought was a great idea. So I kept that job. The consultant job, it was a really small business. Like, she only had like 4 people working for her. So, and then we had worked in a huge warehouse, so we all kind of had our own quadrants, and I was able to keep that. And then she was really awesome and let me kind of work as much or as little as I wanted. And since that was like my 3rd job, I think I only worked 3 days a week for her. And then the working for the food cart, again, the food cart remained open-ish, and I was working alone in the prep kitchen, so I was able to do that. And as COVID progressed, the food cart closed for a couple of months, and then I lost that job, but that was totally fine. And then in about March of 2020, I got a phone call for an interview, asking if I can interview for the Antarctic program, and I completely forgot. I was just like, what? Is this a joke? This is still going on? Like, okay. And what was great about it happening at that time was that I had what felt like all the time in the world to focus on this. Once I was offered the job officially, which was as a production cook, I was able to start the PQ process, which felt like a whole other job in itself, especially then, because there was like no one, like you call a hospital or your doctor and there's so much going on. They're like, you want to go to Antarctica? Like, we have people dying. What are you, like, no, what are these words that you're telling me? So a lot of it was just finding a sympathetic nurse who was just kind of maybe excited to not hear something about COVID, and it was just like, oh yeah, we can help you. And so I got all of these appointments booked, just kind of my luck and chance. And a lot of, like, I know, like, with all of the dental work that I needed done for the PQ, a lot of it was like, I felt like not illegal, but they were kind of pushing me in on, like, they weren't taking new patients or seeing new people, or, you know, anything had to be like root canal, like things that were major surgeries were kind of what they were addressing. But I think so many nurses and doctors were so excited about the opportunity that seemed so, I think, fresh in such a kind of bleak time, that they'd like, all right, technically we don't open till 10, but if you come in from 9 till 10, we'll get you in for this appointment. And that was how my whole PQ process went the first time. And again, the whole time I never really thought it was going to happen, but I was like, well, this is something to do. Like, it gave me another job just to, you know, qualify to come down medically. I don't think I fully PQ'd I didn't turn in my application, my actual PQ packet, until probably the end of July. So then this had started in the end of March. It took a while to just kind of get everything done. And there was like follow-up appointments. But after that, I was asked if I would do a full year, because they were kind of more willing to accept people to do a full year at that point. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I didn't want to come down here to begin with. My friend Lauren kind of convinced me that 4 months, like a summer's 4-month contract is nothing, which I agreed with. I was like, that's nothing. I haven't. But then that's kind of right around like all of the protests and things were starting to kind of reach their peak, especially in Portland. And it felt like if I could just leave for a year, if the world goes crazy, at least I could be somewhere that's like protected. So I was like, oh, I guess I would do a year if you needed it. And then because of COVID, that's when they realized they were going to do a scaled back year, like their first scaled back season. So a lot of the positions that they had initially hired and interviewed for were going to be cut. So my primary contract turned to an alternate contract, which again, I was like, that's fine. I don't even believe this is going to happen. And I had already PQ'd and everything was just like, well, if it happens, it happens. And that took me all the way through mid-September. And I remember checking, and I would still like check my email every day, like, well, maybe, but if it's not, it's okay, but maybe. And at that time I was back to working at all three restaurants, jobs, full-time. So I think I worked 6 days a week around September of 2020. And I got an email from Addie, who was the culinary supervisor, whatever, chef of the program at the time. And she's like, okay, can you deploy in 3 weeks? And I was just like, absolutely I can. And she's like, it's just for summer. And I'm like, that sounds perfect. That's exactly what I wanted, I guess. And then that's kind of how this began. And then I think a quick thing to address as far as like what really made me want to come down, what changed my mind. The whole time that I was PQing and interviewing, that whole year I was in contact with Lauren, who was the friend that came down. And so you know Lauren, we had been friends in Portland for years. She used to actually work at a restaurant that I worked at. I always called her my intern because she was the intern when she first came in, and we became friends immediately. And I always found her like sweet, but a little shy, kind of meek, quiet. And we always had like all these fun adventures, but like in a group, she was willing to let, other people take the stage. But I felt just by like her pictures and messages that she was coming out of her shell. And we're the same age, she might be a little bit older. It felt that she completely transformed herself down here, and not like, didn't become someone different, but became like the most, or like her best self, or she just took all of these opportunities and like did them all. And that was so intriguing to me because I felt like, so at that time I was 35, and I think she was as well. It feels like at that age you've kind of invented yourself and you know who you are, and that whatever you made yourself up into in your 20s, by the time you're in your mid-30s, that's you. And I felt that maybe coming down to Antarctica I could also not reinvent myself, but I felt that I was lacking in some way. I don't know how or why. I just thought that there was something missing that maybe Antarctica could help complete. Since my first season till now, I've technically only been off continent for about 3 months and 3 weeks, which has made life at McMurdo, or at least in Antarctica, feel more like the real world, or my real life, or my like real, than my life back prior to this or outside of this. I remember when I left the first time for the 3 weeks, I had felt that I had changed so much, And then all of my friends were still, not all, but many of my friends were still kind of complaining about the same little thing that seemed like really trite to me. And I was like, that's so, like, so much has changed. There's so much more out there. Why are we still mad at this person? Or, so I think it almost made me kind of shun my life back home, because it's felt like we were in our real lives, or in my real life, I get so wrapped up in the little things that I forget to see the big picture. And for whatever reason, I felt that this was part of the big picture. And now I'm ready to go back home to remember all those little things. So it's weird. I haven't had much time back. And I felt being back in Portland after being on continent, I felt that I was on vacation in my life. It didn't feel like I had just gone back. Like, you know, I never really chose to settle. Like, I wanted to go and visit all my friends and do all these things, but I have yet to kind of pick up in a routine or do anything that was, you know, a day-to-day. I was very much just like, oh, I'm gonna order food and visit this friend, and it was more like I was like checking boxes, like things I had to do, but not like day-to-day life stuff. And then also you add in a PQ process again, and that time, and it's like that again felt like more real than whatever was happening in back home. I have a lot of issues that I have to address once I go back home. I feel like I literally put my life on hold, kind of expecting, kind of back from that first season. I was like, I'm gonna be gone for 4 months. Any issue that I have to do, whether it's a bill to pay or a friend, or I have, my big issue right now is I have a condo that I own that I'm renting out to a friend, and I was like, whatever, he'll just, whether or not he pays me, whatever, it's 4 months, we'll deal with it afterwards. So I anticipate, because I have not addressed a lot of these things, that it's gonna be, you know, the immediate, like, oh my gosh, like, you're back, and friends and excitement, but like also the immediate pressure of like all of these things that I've chosen to ignore are now huge problems, and not these little issues. Like, I think I have problems to deal with. But then there's the excitement of like, I'll see my family, and all of my friends, my life, that again, I literally put like my pets and my plants. I can't wait to see my plants, like for real. So I think it's gonna be a mixture of relief, but then also this like, okay, just because you might have put things on hold, the world didn't stay on hold for you, and like actual huge adulting has to happen. And I think being here, you can choose to not adult. I need to go back and do that. In kind of following up with the Lauren story of watching her come out of her shell and hoping that I could do the same, my time in Antarctica has taught me that I am exactly who I am. I've always been this way. I'm not gonna change or become anything more, but it's taught me that that's okay. Like, it's okay to be exactly this me. And I think I haven't presented myself in a different way than I do at home, but since so many people here don't know me, they were okay with, not to say my friends at home aren't okay with me, but realizing how people were very okay with exactly the Anne I presented, that like, I know that I'm enough. That's probably the biggest thing I'll take away from my time here, is that I am exactly how I'm supposed to be. I'm enough. I don't need to try to reinvent myself.
Before Antarctica, I was a heavy equipment mechanic and a bus driver, and I had started a seasonal life. I had quit being a mechanic and started seasonal life, like with Alaska and ski areas, and it fit my lifestyle much better than working in the same job year round. I really enjoyed it. I'd always heard about Antarctica, so I'd always wanted to come down here. What kind of brought me down here was I was in Alaska for my second summer, and I had had a really bad injury to my knee, and so I was recovering from knee surgery at my parents' place. And I was thinking, 40 years old, and I haven't really done anything with my life, like just whatever the next thing is, I hadn't made any plans. And I was like, what's the number one thing I want to do? I want to go to Antarctica, because I had a friend working down here. He said I was just the right kind of person. I'd known about it for years because there were lots of people I had known who had come down here, and they all said I was the right kind of person. So I came down, or I tried really hard to get a job here for that whole year. And then I finally met somebody who had been here and knew somebody to contact. And so I was able to interview and get a job down here. So that was great, because it was, the number one thing on my bucket list while I was sitting recovering. Life here is different from anywhere else. There's just the community. You can't find a community like this anywhere else, not in any kind of seasonal atmosphere, though those are somewhat similar, but we're just so separated from everyone else. And then there's almost no time to be alone here, no place to be alone. It's very difficult to be alone, so you end up making really tight connections with people, because that's really what we have. It's sort of the currency of Antarctica is friendships and interpersonal connections. And so that's what it's all about for me, that keeps me coming back, is just the really intense conversations that you don't have in the real world with people you don't know that well, and you just don't make bonds with people as quickly or easily. There's a lot of positives, but I feel like even more negatives. The positives are I have gained skills here that I never would have gained anywhere else. I just have a lot more self-confidence. I have more confidence to be myself and just not care what other people think, because down here, everybody accepts who I am for whatever it is, because they can't not accept it. So I feel like I have the freedom here to be whoever I want. So in a way, I have more confidence back home, and then in some ways I also have less, because I feel like I can't always just be the full me. I feel a lot more judged, and like society expects people to be certain ways or to not be certain ways. Whereas here, just let your freak flag fly and go with it. And if people don't like it, they just go to the other side of the galley. But yeah, back home, I have to watch a little bit more what I say and how I present myself. Another positive is just all the memories, I got to traverse to the South Pole, and that was really amazing experience. And I got to traverse to Marble Point and sit with my back to a glacier, and the sun hit a pond of algae that was below, and it was a frozen pond with all these carbon dioxide bubbles from the algae just frozen in the ice. And I laid on that and looked down at these bubbles for hours. It was so fascinating. But then when the sun hit it, just the surface layer melted, and all these carbon dioxide bubbles were popping, and it sounded like pop rocks. And it was so loud because there was no sound. Everything was dead silent except the glacier I had my back to occasionally would have this loud crunch, and then all of this pop rocks nonsense on this pond. And so just little experiences like that, meditating with a emperor penguin at 3 a.m. on the ice shelf, just sitting. I mean, I wasn't close. We were probably 100 feet away from each other, and it knew I was there, and I knew it was there, but we weren't bothering each other. We were just sitting. I was looking at the same view it was looking at and just sat for an hour. So memories like that will always be with me. And anytime I feel panicky or sad or stressed out, those are good memories to go back to and be like, okay, I was there, and I can still kind of relive that experience a little bit. So that's another great thing I take home with me. Some of the negatives are like, you can't find a community like this. So I always feel like there's something missing in my life when I'm at home. I feel like, I can't just get together with all my friends every Sunday for coffee, all these super close friends, and just be silly and wear onesies and, hang out in my pajamas in public. You can't do that back home. So I always feel like there's a little bit of something missing. Also, my work experience that I've gained here doesn't quite translate well. So even though I'm a heavy equipment operator here, and I'm kind of maybe not an expert, but I've been doing it long enough. I know what I'm doing. I know how to work with snow and all of these things. And then I go back to the States, and I'm always sort of at the bottom rung in any job I get, and just trying to figure it out because it's not the same. Yeah, just a longing for community, I can't just be in 3 rock bands at a time, because it's not like there's a band room set up in the rest of the world. If I want to play music with people, we all have to bring our instruments, get together, find a place to do it, set it all up, break it all down. It's a huge production, and find places to play gigs. And so I've done a little of that, but it's a lot more difficult to work that in, especially in rural Alaska. There's not a lot of options for that. I always kind of have a fear of not finding this, because I won't find this experience again anywhere else. So I sort of always have that, emptiness and fear of not having this again. Because partly, as I get older, the PQ process, the physical qualification process, gets more and more intense every year. Every year I have more tests, and it seems like I have to wait longer. And I feel like, although in some ways it's good to have all of my medical stuff brought forward in my life, because I might not go do all this testing every year, even though maybe we all should. It's not something we all do. So it's good to know more about my body and my health, but it's also bad because I feel like my worth is based on, my whole worth is based on this medical judgment that's being made about me, about whether I can come back to this most wonderful life that I have, or have to find a new life. So every year I have that kind of fear and judgment and that sort of thing. So those are the negatives about that I take home with me from here. This place has been the most amazing experience, and it's changed my life forever. Even though there's all those negatives, there's so many positives, and just an internal spiritual happiness and confidence that I don't think I would have found otherwise.
I grew up in a very tiny town in Missouri. It's 45 minutes outside of Kansas City. There were 26 people in my graduating class. 13 of us had been together since kindergarten. Very tiny. The idea of traveling for a living was always appealing, but didn't seem feasible. I went to college, found a softball scholarship, ended up wanting to go for tourism, Bachelor of Science in Tourism. Made a stupid mistake when I was in my early 20s and didn't finish school. Because of the classes that I took for tourism, I found out about seasonal work, and coolworks.com is a seasonal based job website. And I was 26 at the time and working in Missouri, and looked around and realized I didn't want anyone's life that I was surrounded by. that kind of put me in a rut, if you will, a depressing mood. And I started looking at the cool works and started applying to anywhere I'd never been and anything that sounded remotely interesting. I ended up in Vermont my first season, and from there went to Alaska the following summer and met my best friend, Tobi. It was always her dream to come down here. I'd never really, Antarctica was just a white spot on the bottom of the globe. It wasn't real in a tangible way. And the idea of traveling that far, just not something I ever thought about was even possible. So Tobi started doing it in 2013. A few years later, I was working at a lodge, and we ran into each other when we were on vacation, and I was complaining about my job just kind of being done, and she told me that they were taking applications. So same thing, went online, applied for anything I thought I could remotely do, was interviewed 6 weeks later, and was hired 2 months later. So that was in 2017, and I've been coming down here every summer, winter, whatever, depending on what country or continent you're on, since then, except for the winter of 2021. COVID kind of knocked out a lot of us for that season. My position was cut permanently starting that season, so I have been in the same department all 5 seasons that I've been down here, but I transitioned to a different role within that department. I have made more lifelong friends here in this community than I think I have made anywhere else. And I think that's a lot to do with the lifestyle that we have down here. It's kind of crazy. It's hard. It's chaotic. But there's a community camaraderie that you can't beat. You can't find anywhere else, or at least I've never found it. One of the things that struck me my first season especially was the volunteering here. A lot of events, a lot of community-based get-togethers, or just different events will not happen without volunteers. And it shocked me the first time that everyone was so on board with it. And would like to say that I've become part of the community in that way, volunteering multiple ways. And I think that definitely adds to the experience of being down here. Going back home, it's finding different ways you can help out. Besides the town that I grew up in, I haven't really, as an adult, lived in a place long enough to feel connected to a community, except down here. And I think part of that is the volunteer and the chaoticness of it. It kind of brings us all together. My time off of ice, because of my time on ice, I do appreciate different things more. Being able to buy my own groceries and make my own food is one of them. Going out in nature and being surrounded by, the scents and smells of soil and earth and trees and hearing animals, I appreciate more. Not that it's not beautiful here and you don't have a different kind of beauty. It's stark in its own beauty in that way. But my relationship with my family has gotten closer. I am really bad about staying in contact down here. So when I'm home, I'm a lot more present, a lot more connected. I also have found that whether I realize it or not, am also on the search for a community that I feel even remotely like this. Haven't found it yet. Still hopeful. I haven't found it yet. But it also, working down here has taught me that I can handle a lot in a lot of diverse situations. It has helped me realize that my job is not the end of the world. And I love the fact that things can change and do at a rapid pace. Sometimes it's startling and you don't really want that to happen. But I feel like I've gained more perspective on life in general because of the experiences I've had down here. It's crazy. In the best possible way. I will come down at least for another one and then may take a break, but I can see myself returning for as long as they'll let me.
For more information on how you can get to Antarctica, visit the United States Arctic Program website for a list of companies hiring to support the program. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as that tells the YouTube algorithm to push it out to people watching similar content. And here are 2 other videos I think you will enjoy.